So this is our final application, and what we now do is examine the welfare implications of a positive externality. So what are the welfare implications of a positive externality, and as opposed to a negative externality, which we have modeled on the supply side, as opposed to a negative externality, which we have modeled on the supply side. So what we did is we said, okay, if there's a negative externality, we should take into account, or we should consider the real supply function to be much higher or much more to the left than it actually is. When it comes to a positive externality, we actually model it on the demand side. So we get a much higher utility from something. So the example of a positive externality would be if I, let's say, live in a neighborhood and I have, very friendly neighbors that I can rely on. If I have, let's say, an emergency, or who look after my apartment when I'm traveling or so, they don't charge me for that. So my demand function for, let's say, housing is enhanced by the nice neighbors that I may have, but I don't have to pay for it, so that is for free. Another example for positive externality might be if you have, for example, a mill near a river, and the mill is being powered by the water or by the stream of the river, then the shuffleboard of the mill that powers the mill injects a lot of oxygen into the river, and so near the mill, near the shuffleboard of the mill, near the river, when there is more oxygen, that attracts more fish, and that enhances the fish growth. So the fishermen who fish there, they get bigger fish. So that's another positive externality. So the demand function for, let's say, recreational activities of fishermen is enhanced by the bonus of there being bigger fish from the mill. So the mill does not only generate a marginal utility from, let's say, the flour it produces or the bread that it bakes, but there is an additional social benefit to it, which is like that people who fish there, they get bigger fish than what the fish normally would be, because the water is so much enhanced with oxygen from the shuffleboard. And another example that you may find in the textbook is, let's say, if you have a apple orchard and in a bee farm, and then the bee farm that produces honey, they will fly back and forth to the apple orchard and pollinate the apples, and then you have more apples, and at the same time the bees, they get the nectar from nearby. So there is also like mutually beneficial spillover effects from an apple orchard and a bee farm or a honey farm. So the way we model a positive externality is that we model it on the demand side. So everything else so far, like a tax, a subsidy, and a negative externality, they all affected the supply, but the demand, a positive externality, shifts the demand up. So there's the private demand plus a social benefit, and we can think of it as a right shift or an upward shift. So there is like this additional benefit. So this is, let's say, the demand function that goes from 10 to 10. That's like the marginal utility that you pay for bread from the mill, and then you get this additional benefit from the bigger fish next to the mill where you buy your bread. So we have here the demand function plus social benefit. And here the demand function goes from 10 to 10. That is just the benefit from, let's say, the bread. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to first identify again our reference scenario. And our reference scenario is the social optimum. Well, and the social optimum is actually here, because that is the true demand function. People do not only demand, let's say, the bread, but also the recreational activities near the mill. So they should pay, the equilibrium price should be 7. The equilibrium quantity should be 5. And so let's just write that down. So social optimum benchmark scenario. Okay, so we have our parameter and we have our value. Okay, so the price, the equilibrium price, should be 7. Equilibrium quantity should be 5. Okay, so this would be here. So again, and then of course that is equal to quantity demanded and quantity supplied and the quantity turned over. So let's just call it like this and skip the quantity demanded and quantity supplied. And so how big is consumer surplus? In the social optimum, so in the consumer surplus is now this area and this area is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's the height, base 5, 5 times 5, 25 over 2, 12.5. Then producer surplus, that would be this area here. And producer surplus is obviously also 12.5. Okay, so total welfare should be 25. Okay, but now what do we actually get? So because we do not factor in the social benefit, the market actually clears at the price of 6. And the actual quantity turned over is 4. So this is where the market clears. Okay, so now we can see how much is the actual consumer surplus. So let's do a new table for the non-internalization scenario. So we have our parameter. Maybe have our value. Okay, so if we do not internalize this positive externality, our price is 6. Quantity turned over is 4. How big is producer surplus? So producer surplus is now only this area here. Okay, so this area is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 16, 8. So producer surplus is 8. And now consumer surplus looks a little bit different because the consumers at the quantity of 4, they get first this. So this area is 2 times 4, that's 8. And this triangle on top of it. And this triangle is 1, 2, 3, 4. Base is 4, that's another 8. So in this case, consumer surplus is also 8. But actually, sorry, it's 16, but it includes the, first of all, let me just, so consumer surplus is 16, and you see it includes all that social benefit here. So consumer surplus, which includes the social benefit of 8. So consumer surplus of 16 includes 8 of social benefit. Okay. Or if you want to factor out the social benefit, what we can do is if we just take a look at, what is the, so what is the social benefit associated with, actually I'll just delete that here quickly. So that is one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to say, okay, let me just delete this one here again quickly. Okay. So the private, so we can also think of it, if you just take a look at the private demand, which is the social benefit from consuming the bread from the mill, then this triangle here is the consumer surplus, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4. So producer surplus is 4 times 4, 16 over 2. So, consumer surplus is now 8. And if you want to say separately, well, there's another social benefit, which of course accrues to the consumers, and which previously I already combined in the consumer surplus, but I just want to break it up. So we have this initial social benefit, which is this area here, which is 2, and we have that 2 4 times, right? So here we have the social benefit from being able now, for example, to fish bigger fish near the mill, and this is the consumer surplus from, let's say, the bread, the flour that you get. So now we have it like this. Okay, so now when we said that welfare is equal to consumer surplus plus producer surplus plus tax revenue minus subsidy cost minus social cost from a negative externality. But now what we need to do is we also need to add the social benefit from a positive externality. So plus social benefit from positive externalities. So this is what welfare is. We started out saying it is consumer surplus plus producer surplus plus tax revenues minus subsidy cost. Then we added the negative, or we subtracted the cost from a negative externality, and now we add the benefit from a positive externality. Okay, so now in this case, welfare is 8, 16, 24. But we see in the social optimum, we should have 25, so we have a deadweight loss of 1. So a deadweight loss of -1. And obviously there is this deadweight loss, and I'm very sure you can see it. It is obviously this triangle here, because if we took into consideration the social benefit, well, we would have more economic activity, but we don't realize that economic activity because we somehow do not internalize that social benefit. So that's why the market clears at 4 instead of clearing at 5. And of course, the market equilibrium price is 6 instead of only 7. So we have this triangle here as a deadweight loss. So a positive externality is a little bit similar to the problem of a subsidy, because in the presence of positive externalities, we produce, it's actually not, it's not similar to a subsidy, I'm sorry, but we produce too little of a good thing. So that's the problem of positive externality. We have a deadweight loss because we do not produce enough of a good thing. So we miss out on opportunities to have, let's say, if the price were 7, we would produce maybe more mills near the river, and that would allow more consumers not only to buy more bread, but also to enjoy more recreational activities. Anyhow, so in the case of a positive externality, we produce too little of a good thing. In the case of a negative externality, we produce too much of a bad thing. And again, the negative externality is a little bit similar to the subsidy, where we also produce basically too much than what the social optimum is. Okay, but this concludes pretty much the welfare analysis. So we have now a pretty good understanding of what is a welfare implication of a price ceiling, price floor, tax, subsidy, negative externality and positive externality. And yeah, let's just stop here and then we'll work on a problem set.